Good evening. Welcome to Cape Charles Town Council regular meeting, January 17th, 2019. Can I get a roll call?
Madam President.
Wilson present.
Let you know we have a quorum also, Councilwoman Holloway and Vice Mayor Bennett is absent tonight, work related, I believe. We have a moment of silence and a pledge of allegiance. Presentations and recognitions. Phase 4 Southern Tip Bike Trail update on the fire home.
Good evening, everyone. So we just wanted to give you a quick update on the application that went in this fall.
Speak louder.
You guys hear me okay now?
Is it on?
It is on. I'll try to speak up. Yes, I'm just going to give you a brief update on the application that we submitted in the fall. VDOT has had time to review that, and their recommendation moving forward is to postpone that application until this coming fall. And that's based on two main factors. So the first one is the uncertainty of the schedule for the Smart Scale project that would install that second stoplight at the Cape Charles Food Line. Basically, if that project were to get delayed, it would affect our schedule, and if we go over the schedule that we filled into our application, then the locality could be subject for coming up with the rest of the plans. So obviously, we'll have that nailed down first. And the other big factor is the former rail yard and the unknown of whether there'll be any environmental contaminants turned up during testing. And again, that could drastically alter the project budget if they do turn up contaminants. And VDOT said this could be an issue because even if we were to end at an alternative trailhead at the Cape Charles Museum like we proposed, that would represent a change in scope, and therefore that could also compromise our ability to get funding. So to resolve these issues, VDOT recommends taking that same application and applying this fall, but they're going to work with the AMPDC between now and then to actually make it into a two-phase project. So we'll have one phase where we're looking at just the rail yard and doing environmental testing, and that'll have its own preliminary engineering and construction, and then a second phase that would build out the trail from there to Food Line. And that's through their location and design department. They're going to work with us. They'll kind of outline a rough scope of what they're going to do in an email, and in the next month they should get back to us with more of a concrete schedule about how they're going to work with the PDC. Obviously, this will be at no additional cost to the town. VDOT's not planning to charge us anything. So, did you guys have any questions about the project?
I had a question on the trailhead coming into town. I know the plans at one time showed it, I guess, two options, but you were referring to the one coming right into town as being an alternate. So have you settled on one? That's what I asked.
A or B, right?
Right, so it'll still follow the same path into town. Basically, it will either end at the Cape Charles Museum if environmental testing in the rail yard shows there's going to be contaminants and it'll be cost prohibitive. But the preferred option is to go all the way to the marina and have the trailhead there.
Okay.
Okay. And I have a map with that.
No,
That would go around the south side of the upland.
Yeah, but I think it goes over towards Bayshore Concrete, right?
So it goes through the hump and then kind of along the south end of the rail yard to the marina.
Okay, all right.
And when you say the resubmittal in the fall, what do you mean about what time frame?
Sure, so it'll be due the same time as it was this year on November 1st. And they have a pre-application process that they're going to start working on with us in May. So.
Thanks.
All right. Did anybody else have other questions?
Yeah, just good old VDOT.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you guys.
first one is Cynthia Dempster.
I think she's currently thinking.
Okay. Next one is Bill Burkett, 210 Haswell. Let's hear about beach plan and parking.
Good evening all, Bill Paquette, 210 Tazewell Avenue.
How we doing this evening?
Pardon me?
See how we doing this evening?
We're doing fine, how about you, Scott? Good. So I got two things quickly. One is Mason Avenue parking. Several years ago, I stood here and I also wrote to the council in opposition of reverse angle parking. And apparently, a lot of folks agree with that now, so what could be worse than reverse angle parking, you might ask? There's a plan to implement pull-in angle parking. And pull-in angle parking, as I see it, if you happen to be a person who is parked next to a large SUV or an extended pickup raised off the ground, is similar to asking those folks to back up with their eyes closed. So I think that is another bad idea. I would be in favor of parallel parking for the full length of Mason Avenue. Secondly, on a more positive note, tonight you're going to receive a plan from the Wetlands Board, of which I am a member, for beach management. And a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of thought went into these recommendations. What the public thinks of it, what the town council does with it, remains to be seen. But I want to just acknowledge publicly and thank Ann Hayward Walker for all her work on this project. She put in a great amount of effort, time, expertise, and came up with a great product. So I just want to thank her. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Kim? Sneakers, I think.
I'm not now, but.
You're good now? Okay. Tim Russell?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm with the Citizens for Central Park. I'm here with a couple of goals. One, and they're both related to a communication I sent to you just today, so I'm sure you haven't had a chance to read it. But it is a list of maintenance items for Central Park that need some attention. Some of them probably fairly recent, some have been out there for a while, but we'd like to have some attention to as soon as possible. So anything you can do to work with the town manager, with Public Works to affect that would be much appreciated. Second, and most more importantly even, that is looking for some direction in terms of an ongoing process that the town could use to engage with, and the citizens of Central Park could use to engage with each other, with Public Works and the council and town management, to really have a process for looking at maintenance items at the park on a more regular basis. Of course, the group has been working with the town and Public Works for many years in terms of projects and maintenance, but for one reason or another, kind of a process has kind of fallen out of habit. So I'd like to, if I could, ask you to, if you have any suggestions here, provide them on how to proceed, and if you could possibly provide me with a liaison that I may connect with the town to really set up possibly a quarterly process for reviewing maintenance items that need to be addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is all.
The next consent agenda, which includes the approval of the agenda format, approval of minutes, approval of November 30th, 2018 financial report, monthly department reports, and appointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
I move that we accept the consent agenda as written, which includes the appointment of Herbert Tom to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Mr. Mayor, would you mind if I ask for a library board to be pulled out separately from that question about, I have no objection to the rest of the consent.
Which
agenda.
one?
Library board. Or library board, library.
Report?
Yes, I'm sorry.
You want to pull that out?
Yes, please, after the motion. Just that, that's
As amended. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Library board?
Okay, the question that I have is that, I don't know how many months we've been looking at this, the library monthly report, and the issue of the odor is still there. And it's almost like cut and paste, like it's very bad recently, and people complain about it. So I guess I just want to talk about that or ask the question, Larry or others. What is going on with that? I thought we had a solution several months ago, but that must not be working.
We don't have a solution. And
Okay.
the reason it keeps coming up is because it's persistent. I, working with the library director, and in fact, I've attended the December and January library board meetings. We had the sump pump looked at and the moisture downstairs in the furnace area. There is moisture that comes in, so that basement does need to be sealed, and the sump pump needs to be replaced. And we do have a price on that. It's about $9,600. It would be within the scope of repairs to that building.
Is that where the odor comes from?
Well,
Are you
when
sure?
the basement people did came out, they also did humidity tests. And the humidity test came out, the numbers came out low, so that it's not a source of mold. So as far as the sump pump and the moisture downstairs is concerned, that wouldn't be the cause of mold. There's intrusion upstairs, and there's a room upstairs that has a lot of leakage through either the wall or the ceiling, or the roof. So that needs to get looked at. The other thing is the venting of the bathrooms and the trap situation. We do have the plumber coming. We're supposed to be here yesterday, we're supposed to be here today. They'll actually be here next week. And we'll look at that, because if it's a venting situation, that can be addressed. And if it's a trap situation, that can be addressed. If it's an issue about mold from something other than where the sump pump in the basement is, then we have to look at the situation on the second floor. And one way of saying that building needs a lot of work. And it's
I
been
appreciate that.
neglected a long time.
I appreciate it. Thank you for answering.
We're ready to move on.
Yes, sir.
Unfinished business. Cape Charles Multi-Use Trail Project Update Phases 2 and 3.
Yeah, more feedback.
Mr. Paddock, how are we doing this evening?
We are doing wonderful. How are you all? So where we are on phase 3, this is really phase 2 and 3. I'll talk about phase 3 first. We are just about done with the design. Our consultant is finishing up the plan specifications and the bid package. I should have that for review by the end of the month. We're working very closely with them, so I would think that our review in-house would be just a couple of days. We'll send that on to VDOT, and who knows how long it's going to take. We do have to get approval from VDOT to advertise the project, and I suspect that's going to be a several-month process to get that approval. What that's going to do is push our construction schedule out. We don't want to start construction just prior to the summer season. So even if we are ready to go out and advertise, even within a month or two, we're not going to do it. We're going to have to hold that and get the ad out toward the end of the summer, and then award a construction contract likely in the end of the summer and start construction. There is a note in your report, in my report, that they've also advised that they're not going to approve the advertisement for bid until we close out the construction contract for phase 2. As you know, construction on that has been finished for a year. We have been arm wrestling with the contractor a little bit about a final change order. They have had that now since, well, the first version of it since early December. They complained about a few things, we modified a little bit. They've had it since before Christmas, and we have gotten nothing back. So we're about ready to issue a unilateral change order and move things along. So we'll get that contract closed out and then get on with construction of phase 3. Question?
Yeah, what's the time frame on that?
Phase 3?
No, the closeout. I mean, you gotta hold their feet to the fire, I mean.
Absolutely. We can issue a change order, then it's up to them to build. And I have to have the final billing and then off we go. But I can't control it, unfortunately.
So is there still some scope of work to do for phase 2?
No,
No.
it's been done for a year.
Okay.
Well, the only scope of work, there's some warranty work that needs to be done. There are some dead trees that have to be replaced under maybe 6 or something like that.
Yeah, they took care of the electrical box, though, right?
Electrical box.
The one that basically was indoor or outdoor. Right there.
No, I think Dave fixed it. You fixed that, didn't you? Fixed the relay? Yeah, it was, yeah.
Your comment in the notes here with 2 months for VDOT to turn around, was that your thoughts or they had hinted at 2 months?
It's my very optimistic thought. I mean, that could easily be doubled.
You know, how long did the design part take? You got stuck there for a while, wasn't
It was double what we expected. I don't want to be nothing. They're understaffed like all the state agencies, and a lot of projects to manage, and we're a locally administered project. This is a peanut in their scope of responsibility, so that's what we get.
History of VDOT, you probably get along with them better than anybody in the town, and at least my 30 years.
It's starting to be a little bit different, of course.
Anybody have any more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. On to new business, beach and dune management plan. Wetlands Coastal Dune Board Chair, Ms. Ann Haymore. Before you get started, Ann, I want to say thank you all for the work you put into this long document. It's very well presented.
Well, thank you.
I read it last night. I read some tonight. It was a lot of good detail in there, so thank you all very much for all the work.
Thank you. So, thank you for the opportunity to provide this input to the town. And I just want to acknowledge, especially working with John Lockwood over the last few years, and I mentioned some of your stuff in here, John, and Larry D. Ray, and Tracy, and of course Zach. So they've all helped in addition to the board members. Now, we met after the initial draft, and the board members had comments, which Zach and Tracy and I incorporated, and so this reflects, I think, pretty much and Russ is happy. So,
How to do that?
we just stayed on. Okay, so I wanted to I'm gonna give you an overview. I'm not gonna go through every page. I think it's been posted to the internet so everybody can see it, but this is really a guidance document of what we think are appropriate practices and activities for our public beach. See if I get this right. So the contents, there's an introduction with purpose and scope. Scope meaning like how much of an area. So this is not, it doesn't go down Mason Avenue. It's really from the low water line to the sidewalk on Bay Avenue, to the bottom of the sidewalk on Bay Avenue. There's some historical background, some background on coastal processes, just how beaches and Chesapeake Bay beaches work. There are some regulations that affect our plan and how we manage it. Notably, the the Virginia guidelines for wetlands and dunes and coastal zone management laws that are passed in the state of Virginia, town ordinance, and in FEMA. We spent some time talking about issues, problems, and challenges because that really helps inform what we're trying to accomplish here. We want to address issues, we want to minimize problems, and we want to overcome challenges. We've got beach management practices, good management practices divided into these categories. You can see, I'm not going to go through all the categories, but I'll show an example of a summary table. And then we recognize at the end that there are different ways you can implement these practices, specifically through, what kind of funding and personnel needs are. We've received input from the citizens of the town twice, once in 2016 and another time in 2018. And the appendices contain summaries of those comments that we received. And we also have provided, this sort of builds on the presentations we've given to the town council in 2016 and 2018. So what's really, I think, important is that we try to, what kind of was the information we considered in developing the plan, certainly the regulatory guidance that we should be consistent with. I would call it best available knowledge, which includes scientific studies from them, studies from other states, FEMA, Army Corps of Engineers, experience and observation from the board members, longtime residents like Russ and Sutton, the Public Works Department like John, the City of Norfolk Environmental Services who's managed similar beach to ours for over 30 years. And then there's, monitoring. So VIMS has done studies that have documented how the beach and the shoreline has changed. And we did really take account of public input. There are comments in 2016 of why was the beach important, questions, concerns, and certainly blowing sand. And in 2018, we gave them the opportunity and requested their specific suggestions on good practices. And so this is just an excerpt. I know you can't see it very well, but you can see we've listed, summarized on the left, all the suggestions that people made for good practices and our comments to each of those comments that we received is on the right. So that's in the appendix. So the purpose of this plan is really to guide the town maintenance of the beach and dunes in accordance with ordinances and good practices. We've given special consideration to the town's annual budget cycle and planning, and also the limited resources that the town has to carry things out. The scope, as I mentioned, is the beach area and the dunes, including the boardwalk on Bay Avenue. It does not include activities or practices for the land areas beyond the boardwalk or the water areas west of the low water line. So, for example, if boats are going to raft off the beach, that's not really part of the beach per se, that's more of another town issue. Okay, the annual budget cycle, I don't think I have to go through this for everybody, but it's all written out the plan. And so what we've tried to do is time our recommendations to this cycle so that it's not disconnected and that it can be easy for the town to deal with. And it really recognizes the fact that the town's fiscal year begins in July, and in September, the summer has ended, and we begin looking at how to manage the beach over the winter. Then in January, February, we start planning for the next year, including input into the budget. March and April, Public Works begins to prepare for the summer season, and then also revise the budget, and implement new things, finalize the budget in May, then get a new budget and implement that June through August, and then start over again. So there's some key assumptions that really dictate how we've done this, develop these good practices. One is that beaches are dynamic, so for I think the town council, those of you with responsibilities for funding, I'd like to say that beach nourishment is a one-time thing. Let's do it once and we're done, but we're not. And so once it begins, periodic renourishment is required, typically every 4 to 5 years, or following major storms. And so that's not something we've really, I think, done in the past. We've taken advantage of the Corps of Engineers nourishment, but it doesn't happen, that we don't get that all the time. So that's kind of a thing we have to keep in mind. Another key assumption is that planting of native vegetation is really the key way to trap sand, and is always preferable to use of man-made structures. American beach grass is the best vegetation for this area of the east coast to stabilize the dunes and prevent sand blowing. Vegetation that should be planted on areas of bare sand, both on the bay side and landward sides of the dune. And, you know, for when we were asked to help in 2016, it was like a month before, well, I mean, it was really right at the same time with Corps of Engineers. So thinking ahead, if we're going to get into this cycle, you really have to plant that beach grass, you know, a season, a year, a growing season, a year or two ahead for it in order to take hold before you add more sand. So that's really something we think is key to remember. So what's our goal? It's a continuous dune system. Right now it's bisected by the street entrances that is low, about 40 feet wide, and sand stabilized by American beach grass. This is an example of the Norfolk Eastview Beach, which is the newer beach in Norfolk. And this is one that, in the Heinz, you know, with their benefit of having managed the older sections of Ocean View, Chris, you probably, the Cottage View section is the one that's one of the older where the houses go right up to the beach. This really reflects their best efforts at managing the beach and preventing sand from going into houses and staying on the beach. But our beach is coming along pretty well. So I went on Wednesday so if you remember in 2016, before we had that sand and the American beach grass planting, the Army Corps of Engineers, it was kind of open at the two streets that were north of, at the north end. And especially right around Washington, between Washington and Jefferson, where that sand just blew. So we're getting there. If you can see, if you can see, we're getting kind of this low, wide configuration. This is from the street side, but this is standing in the entrance. And you can see it's kind of the second photograph. You can see it started getting this wider, low, wide. Oh, there's Dave. Hi, Dave. We're getting there, you know, it's working. So what are our objectives? To maintain or improve the ability of the primary frontal dune, that's kind of guidelines worrying. To protect the public boardwalk, the street and adjacent properties from wave erosion, storm, and water surge, storm-induced flooding which results from sand buildup and poor functioning of the storm outfall at the southern end of Bay Avenue and Mason Avenues in the harbor. We want to minimize the inundation of areas behind the frontal dune crest by accumulating wind-blown sand into this low, wide dune system. We also want to use the dunes to help maintain sand reservoirs, which will help, again, stabilize the shore through the dune system. We want to recognize that maintaining, you know, recreation is the key function of this beach, so we want to maintain and improve public access to the beach, and promote dune robustness that will meet or exceed FEMA guidance, because if we want to get any FEMA money, if it is wiped out, you kind of have to have a plan. And then the last thing is really we want to recognize that maintaining water views at each end of Bay Avenue is important for everybody in conjunction with advancing one or more of the other priorities. Some of these we got from Norfolk, we kind of revised to make sense for Cape Charles. So at the end of in this implementation section, I know you can't read this, I just want to show you that there's a list, kind of a summary list of all the good practices. So the good practices section gives you a sort of a narrative description of what we recommend. And this, what you really can't see on these little screens, so this has the timing. The second column has the timing, like quarterly or spring or something like that. And it's really intended to provide public works some easy to follow sense of, what do they want us to do? Okay, so, and I'm going to show some examples of those ones that we circled. Access is something that we talked a lot about, and people gave us a lot of suggestions. And we considered all of them, and we kind of figured there were 4 categories. So I wanted to show you, we didn't do pros and cons for every single set of good practices we received, but just the ones that really are things that are choices that the town really has to make. So the elevated wooden walkways we think are appropriate for either end of Bay Avenue. The elevated really being at Mason Avenue and the Fun Pier. And we think it's probably a good idea to use down the road, composite decking material to minimize long-term cost and have less of a problem. Sand trails are really the primary recommendation for the access to the streets between the two ends. Some people recommended dune mats. We looked at those. Delaware is using some of the dune mats. They're moderate cost, but they are a potential safety hazard when wet. We're not sure about the durability, and they are and they get covered up by the sand. So we thought, we spent all this money, now we're going to have to maintain those too, and street flow and all that stuff. So we're not recommending those. And then we are suggesting some ropes and posts to help define the sand trails better. So here's some aspects that I took Tuesday morning I went and took some pictures. So we talk about the blowing sand as a nuisance, but it also can accumulate and become sort of a safety thing. I think, just by the way, I've noticed that the sidewalks have really been the ones that I complained, but Bill and I walk on Bay Avenue and we can't walk side by side because some of the sand, everything is grown, which I complain about all the time to him. So this time when I looked, you guys have cleaned up almost all of the sidewalks, I think. And so this is just an example near Monroe, where it's a lot that's owned by I don't even know who owns it. It's not here, but that's one where you can see how it kind of is encroached. And just to give people another idea, I just noticed this the other day. This sand, this fire hydrant, this is at Madison and Bay. Over the years, the sand has just grown up, and then the vegetation grows, and so we've covered up about half the fire hydrant. It's still usable, but this is kind of it's just something that happens with this expletive deleted sand that blows. So these are pictures from Norfolk at East Beach. And this is what they think is kind of the goal. You get these sand trails, again, that's their good beach that they've been able to actively manage and implement what they've learned over 30 years. The one on the right is Cottage View Beach, which is the really old part of Ocean View. And that's where, you didn't really manage the vegetation very well. You had all these volunteer trees. That was a word I learned from Russ Dutton when I moved here. I really love that, these volunteers. These volunteer vegetation. It never really got managed. It got kind of out of control, and now you've got something which really doesn't. People are irritated with because it blocks their view. The landowners here nearby. Now you have to, because it's built up all this vegetation. Now you have to build these walkways over it. Now you don't have you may have a continuous dune system. It kind of is patchy all along. But anyway, that's not what we want. But we do have a lot of volunteer trees which are starting to grow up, and so I think that's something we just have to think about. So I went and sort of took pictures for you all to see the access points now. So Washington Avenue is just looking great. It's a beautiful little sand trail. It may not be wide enough for the, I can't remember what you all decided, if just going down by Mason Avenue is good enough and you don't really need access at both ends. But anyway, it looks beautiful. The Jefferson Avenue. So John, when did you guys install the temporary sand fences for the winter?
First part of November.
First part of November. So anyway, they are doing bang up job at trapping sand and keeping it. Again, the goal is to keep the sand on the beach, not on Bay Avenue. So that's Jefferson Avenue. It's really trapping the sand great. Randolph Avenue is kind of a mess. I mean, it's just, I wish you could see it better, but if you can see here, the one on I'm not going to hit you with a laser pointer, but the sand has already filled in the walkway. And that's been a problem a lot of different years. And so this is nature saying, I want to be a continuous dune system. So I don't know what we're going to do about it, but you've already got kind of this filled in, maybe you work around it in the spring, I don't know. Monroe Avenue, the temporary sand fences are beginning to build, again, this continuous dune system, and we're not talking about sand trails over something 40 feet high, we're talking about something that, again, stays pretty low. Tazewell Avenue, I don't know why Tazewell is so neat and tight and clean. I think it may be because there's so much vegetation all around it that maybe it's sort of stabilized itself. And so, if there is a need to have a platform somewhere in the middle of the beach Tazewell looks to be, at this point, I don't know, we'd have to go back. That's part of monitoring, you know, we'd have to just go see. And then the other thing is this, the pictures look so little, you just can't see it. But anyway, if you're near Jefferson Avenue looking south, and the laser doesn't see, but if you can see, the pointer doesn't work very well, but there's a fence. So they put, what we've said is put perpendicular fences. Right, so here's the water. So we've said put fences like this down the beach to keep the sand from blowing all over the place. So they are working like gangbusters. So this is the one, so you can just since November, so the sand is building up behind these and on Madison and Monroe. So this is really great. So it serves as an on-site reservoir for our sand. So it's not, if we didn't put these in, then the sand would just blow down the beach, fill in the access next to the pier, go over the pier, and also put more sand in the harbor and cover up the outfall. So anyway, that's something that we figured we've been doing since 2016. It's worked pretty well. Now there is one thing, the summer beach cleaning. We do think it's important, you know, to avoid the emerging beach grass and stay on the lower half of the beach. We recognize that with our limited, so I just want to tell you, the public works guy. So on page 14, I tried to list almost all your duties, all your competing priorities. You have a small group of people who have to do everything. And so, to me, the competing priorities for everything that they have to do is really an issue. And so, where else can you get people to help, or what other resources? So you can get contractors, but then you got to budget for that. You got to, you know, funding allocation. You got to select them and manage their work. But maybe the activities that they'd be good for would be obviously sand nourishment, if you're going to get it from Corps of Engineers, and maybe planting, installing. I'm talking more of the permanent fencing or walkways or construction or something like that. There's been talk about volunteers, but there's a liability issue in town and also a staff attention issue. The Public Works is really not in the business of having to manage volunteers. They got a lot of other things to do. So the thought is there may be an NGO on the shore that manages volunteers routinely, or a high school where they would manage, you know, we could give them some appropriate tasking and they could, if that was, but anyway, these are just options of resources to consider. So, still what has to be addressed that we couldn't, you know, it's something that the town has to decide, is there should be an annual safety assessment, you know, which identifies new needs, you know, what's changed since last year for the current beach season, and then implement those actions. We do think we did suggest quarterly removal on the sidewalks, you know, for Bay Avenue on both sides. But other things like, I don't know, the new sign, if there have to be new signs. One person recommended expanding the swimming area so the boats couldn't get so close to swimmers, something like that. But we should work on defining and enhancing the preferred gathering places in relation to access and structures. So, for example, are we going to make like a picnic area more formally down at the south end near the fun pier? There's kind of space for that, but that's something to be decided. There should be some sort of semi-annual monitoring plan. I think the town and the board could, I mean, I know John does it routinely, goes down and looks at, you know, what's changed or what do we need to do now. Anyway, there should be a plan for that, we think. Probably a beach nourishment plan is necessary. Again, with the reminder that we ought to do planting of beach grass at least a year before to give it a chance to not blow. And then I think we should develop some sort of boardwalk side vegetation management plan. We've got volunteers. And there was one concern, we had a discussion ourselves. We don't want to dig up all these volunteer trees because it's disruptive to the dune, right? It's already stabilizing it. So what Norfolk recommended is that you would cut and then you would brush on something to kill the thing so that you don't really destroy the dune that have already stabilized. So anyway, that's kind of an overview of what we did. And I think the other thing, let's see, there's one other thing. So with the activities and structures, there was one recommendation for some structures on the beach. And I'm not really sure what we want to, I'm not, if there's a code, a section of the code that says that it's unlawful to put any equipment that is not actually occupied or engaged, or to build any kind of fence or other obstruction on the beach. But we have volleyball courts, which kind of maybe do that. So there's one proposal about building out of the way in one area, a kayak, a place to store kayaks for people to use. And I made a comment to that citizen that that's not really in our position. But I do think there are some structures there, so, would be consistent of how we would deal with that. So, any questions?
I have a couple of comments. Well, questions too. Page 6.
Page 6.
And I may be wrong, but it's on page 6, it says most of the historic area of Cape Charles is in a 100-year floodplain. I think didn't that get changed recently?
Yeah, 2016.
Yeah.
So it's down to 500?
Yeah.
Correct.
I think I got
Okey-doke.
And, page 14. This is where I don't understand. It says conventional thinking would indicate the addition of a large amount of sand from the 1940s harbor dredging would enhance and provide large volumes of sand to the southern down-drift shorelines, possibly even causing more infill into Old Plantation Creek. It appears, however, the opposite has happened. The dredge material has mostly moved offshore to form a large shoal, which in turn may have impacted the wave climate. Are you talking about the sandbar that's in front of the beach?
This is out of Scott Hardaway's report, directly out of his report. I think what he's really saying is we probably don't need all the details. I think the bottom line here is that that there is one of the processes that affects our beach is sand deposition, and the overall net movement is to the south. And so there was a large amount of sand from the 40s harbor dredger so the dunes kind of have to have sand to keep filling and moving south.
Right.
And so it's not a mariner's. I don't know if the shoal offhand may have impacted, but we can take that out if that doesn't.
No, I'm just
Yep.
curious.
I just put that there since it was in the VIMS
And
report.
let's see, I can't find which page it was, but you talked about on one of the pages of maintaining a base of 40 foot wide, but I didn't see anything in here about an actual height, maximum height. So are we going to maintain a maximum height, or are we going to let it go 40 foot in the sky, or what are we doing?
Well,
what's the recommendation?
So there are sort of a scale, a ratio of height to width that I don't recall off the top of my head. But that's really how a dune is defined, I think, more. And I think the idea is if we don't want the dunes to get high, like they are at the south end, we have to let them move toward the bay. And we've been round and round about what to do about a set height. And we can't find justification in any place from any studies to cut off part of the height of the dunes. That would destabilize the dunes, cause more sand blowing, and there's no recommended basis for that. So I think I think our feeling is on the board, we accept that the reality is that the dunes are probably higher than if we could start from scratch, we would design them to be at the south end.
Yeah.
But we don't feel we don't feel comfortable making a recommendation to modify it.
There's not a certain time of year that you can cut them off and use that sand to replenish the beach.
There's absolutely, well, there's no support for that on the board to do something like that. And
I'm just thinking, I'm just.
and the reason for that is because the studies that you read and the practice even over in Norfolk has said that just is not a good idea. But
I'm just.
I know. Well,
I'm asking questions.
The height of the
I get asked the questions.
The height of the dunes has been probably the most challenging issue that we've had to look at in the last 2 years. But I will say one thing, that the dunes have been very responsive to the management actions that have been taken with them over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I see.
If we kind of got ahead of it, you know, but we just didn't know 20 years ago what we know now.
Right.
Well, one of the practices going forward is to drive the sand, is towards the beach, just pull the fences out further in front of it once they grow.
Mhm.
So once they get filled, put a fence in front of it, it pushes the dunes.
Right,
And it keeps the height stabilized.
It keeps the height, right.
yeah.
But not beyond where the height's already established.
Correct.
Because when they get good and established with vegetation, they're gonna stay where they are.
Right.
Because that
And that's
vegetation
just part of the dilemma.
yeah,
Well,
that
that's-
vegetation is very deep, because you think about it.
And you can see with the cottage view where they let this sort of land-based tree vegetation grow, you know, you just got a bigger and bigger infrastructure, and, which is not all just dunes. And the other thing that I have to say is, you know, the dunes do help mitigate the impact of wave surge on the boardwalk and the street and all that. But they're not going to stop a tsunami or anything like that. I mean, I don't want to give the wrong impression that
You come
they're,
from the other side anyway.
Truth of the matter is, we're surrounded by 3 sides of water.
That's
And
right.
put the
So-
water's backfill around the creeks.
yeah.
Just in regards to this, these questions, I think included in the recommendations, I don't have them in front of me, is a recommendation to find a way to collect data on the size of the beach, the size of the dunes, and the height and the width. And we
Yeah.
don't have that data right now.
Yeah, so that's really develop a monitoring plan.
Yeah.
We've got surveys of each year, 100-foot segments. So we do have
Oh,
the
good.
size of the, we've been monitoring the beach. And the beach is getting lower, the dunes are getting thicker and higher. Thicker more than anything else.
Right. We just don't have it.
Yeah,
Thicker is what you want.
thicker's what you want. I mean, I sort of wonder, like, how much thicker can they get? I mean, if you want for half a mile, if you're just giving 25 years, I don't know, you know, I mean,
Keep trying bigger.
they try bigger beach, yeah,
So it was a low water mark, and like to be able to recoup some money.
yeah. So there are other details in here about, you know, somebody suggested along the way, talk to the Corps of Engineers, see if there's another project going on the bay where they're doing dredging, that they might want to, you know, take that spoil over here, beyond our very limited agreement that we've got with the Corps of Engineers. So, there's other stuff in here, but, this
You
is
still
just.
have 30,000 yards sitting up in the upland that you can use.
Well, but I guess it's very expensive to get it from there down the beach. So moving the sand from the spoil area where it was deposited requires you sort of having to hire another truck and, right? I mean, it's not cheap to move that sand.
The cost of the sand isn't that much, it's all the trucking. And if I were gonna truck sand to the beach, I would get it up to Gary Wagner's pit up there, because they've got the size sand that we want. It doesn't blow around like talcum powder, it's got a medium size grain, and that's what you want.
But we've got a little continuous cycle now with the putting up the temporary sand fences and capturing it, and then you can use it to fill in areas in the summer. And then in that way, we're kind of recycling the blowing sand. And I think the only other thing that,
You do have something in our budget, Tom, for saying
Yeah.
that 20
That's the question about the sand nourishment. may I ask another question about, to follow up on the discussion about sand management? So I did read in here that the grain size would generally be recommended to be larger than what we have, which is so fine.
Right.
And I can understand why we would do that. But I guess I was wondering, like, what haven't we always been sort of forced to use or required to use the same kind of sand that we had at VIMS a long time ago when there was a sand nourishment project? Didn't VIMS require us to use the same, what's the word I'm looking for, Dave? You know what I'm saying?
Well, you need to-
Grain size, grain, whatever.
The Army Corps has always said, pick the largest grain sand you can find.
Yeah.
And that's always been their thing. And whenever we haul it down there, we dump it out and we go, oh my God, it looks yellow. It's got, you know, but
Oh, yeah.
after a month, it all looks the same.
Yeah.
I mean, it just,
Right.
yeah, it becomes beach sand, so it's bad.
The breaches on the plants, the cocoa pits and all that, it's been a heavier grade sand.
Then what naturally occurs there?
Yeah, I think when we replenished that time, but 06, 07, that was Wagner sand, because that's where we trucked it all in.
Yes, I remember that.
And that was a tremendous amount of sand that we brought from the sand pits up there right in Eastville.
But when the Army Corps pumps it to harbor, you can just
Well, that's
poured into it.
That's a fine sand.
You're gonna get the fine sand.
Well, that's the sand that was there, used to be there that went.
It's a cycle.
So here's the thought, you know, one thing, I don't know if anybody was aware, well, you know about the long-term research program over in Oyster. And they had a little reception at altitude of all the research that they've been doing. And they had some coastal geologists and they had some of the guys were dune specialists. And so talking with them, I said, well, have you ever looked at our beach? And they said, no, because it's not over there. So I said, anyway, showed them the picture on the one of the pictures they had at Cape Charles Beach. I think it might be worth sharing our plan with those guys and seeing if they had, you know, based on their knowledge of dune formation and sand and everything, to see what they might recommend. Because they were thinking that the, you know, if the trend is for all the sand to move south anyway, having the breakwaters kind of stops it, which kind of causes more that there's no sand then to nourish the Bay Creek side. And so, you know, I just think there's some interrelationships of, if you look at the whole shoreline, that I don't know how to leverage and take advantage of fully in our plan. And so we might ask them for some, you know, if you want to review something. Yeah.
Remember the threat of Jockey Ridge?
The threat of what?
Jockey Ridge,
Jockey
They're moving houses in North Carolina now, because it's rolling.
I guess in my case, this is so detailed and so professionally done that I'm not going to have any issues. The question I would have is, where do we go with this thing? Does the town council adopt it, or does the town council take it and hand it to the town staff and say, evaluate and come back and determine to what extent and what budget would be required in order to implement and in what fashion?
I think there's some things in there that's gotta be updated, because a lot of stuff's got 2016 plaster.
Well, then do we have a work session with the town, us, and
So the whole reason that 2016 is that's where we started.
Right.
That's where some of that plan came from, we implemented part of the
But
plan.
some of the implementation, but if it says begin
Well, that's what we ended up, that's when we began.
November 2016.
Yeah, but that's when we
We
began.
adopted, it would say begin 2019.
but I'm assuming the attached slide with November 2016 is this historical information now,
Right.
and that it's all enrolled into this plan.
Yeah, I think it would, I mean,
This
this
is
is
sounding,
asking.
just
Yeah.
for me, because I've been through this before, and Chris has too, this is beginning to sound like Groundhog Day. We need to implement this plan, because 16 is when we started this, and we charged the Wetlands Board to come up with a dunes plan to go ahead and go forward in 2016. So I think we really need to do is implement this and go forward, because Public Works has already been through this, they understand what's going on now. So we have actually a physical plan to actually implement now that we didn't have before. Because we implemented some of it in 16, but we never had the whole entire plan. Now we have the whole entire plan to run with. I say we move along with it and not beat a dead horse in the ground. Because the longer we drag this on,
what I would
More
like to,
problems when I have that dune.
I agree, but what I would like to recommend is, because as Paul stated, there's a ton of detail in this plan. And I think maybe a work session with us and the Dunes and Wetlands Board, so in the future, so we can actually, in the near future, so we can have time to go over it, and if we got any questions, we can answer together, and then we can implement it together.
We've done that. Now, we're doing it again, that's what I'm saying. It's a new cycle of new people, so we're gonna do it again.
Just a clarification, so I just want to be sure that the appendices just contain background information. So the two recommendations for 2016 and the presentation 2018, that's just background information.
Correct.
The real content for the plan is up front, not in the back part. And that,
Okay.
so that's-
Mayor, if I could piggyback on what you're saying, Andy. First of all, the plan is awesome. Compliment all of you guys. You've done a tremendous amount of work, and it really, I don't even know how much it would have cost had we had other folks, outside folks do this, but it's as professional as anything I can imagine. So thank you all so much. It's really great. And all the people who contributed to it. The thing that really sticks out to me about where we are going or hope to go here as we set priorities is that we know the beach is a priority. We've already talked about that earlier in our first priority session. This, I love page 24, it's here, this page 24, these what I'll call the good practices or the best practices, tell us the kinds of things that we would be expecting, okay, if this is a top priority item. And it tells us when, so we get some idea of, in this level of service, what the expectations to do things are. And it tells us when we have to budget for it, when it have to be done, when we budget for it. So I think it would be helpful, to have a breakdown of really what that is, but that's a second tier beyond accepting that whole plan. Here's the kicker. Accepting a plan like this, and we've talked about this before, we talked about it in terms of preservation in our last meeting, means that we mean it and we're going to do it, not like accept a bunch of recommendations and put them on a shelf somewhere. I don't want us to do that. So it also means that we want to commit to these best practices and this kind of service and this kind of resource that it's going to take to get these things done. So I think to answer what you're saying, Mayor, is that that's a more finely detailed discussion about can we do everything that's on here on table 2,
Right.
and can we put it on that kind of schedule that we want to. I think all of us would pretty much agree on the base. Yes, we would. So I'm kind of going to endorse it in general terms, and then as we think, we need to think further about it and incorporate the things that come out of here into this priority setting and strategic.
Well, I can already tell you, one thing that's gonna happen out of this, if we implement this, we don't have enough staff. 'Cause right now, you got 4 guys in Public Works?
Well, we've already contracted for the cleanup along the dunes and the planting of the grass, so
I know,
we
but-
can take that off the table.
I know, but how much is that contracting costing us? Can we do that with the?
Well, we
with
work
it?
with them, so we keep the cost down as much as we can, but we have help.
All right, what I'm getting at is because you got park issues, the dunes, all the other stuff you guys gotta do is a tremendous amount of stuff.
That's right.
And if you sit there and contract it out, and we can hire 2 other guys to do it without contracting it out, I'd rather do that. That way we have at least more staff that can actually deal with the problems at hand and get it out without contracting it out. So I think it'll end up saving money in the long run, because how much is the contracting stuff costing us?
Necessary.
Not as much as two other people involved with our problem here.
Well, I mean,
It'd be a fraction of that.
I know, but some of this is reflecting on stuff that's not getting done.
Like what?
That stuff that's been happening in the park, that's been happening in the park, maintenance in the
We
park.
watch this park seal, we watch the.
Yeah, but a lot of that's,
Hey,
a lot of
we're not
that's.
talking about a
I
park.
know. But anyway,
We're
part
not
of
talking here.
the whole gist of everything.
Yeah.
So coming back, I have no problems of accepting what's here with the understanding that we're gonna get ramifications through budget and staffing as a result.
Right.
That may have to change.
Right, we'll have to have a more finely tuned
Okay, I
discussion
have no
about
problem,
that.
that's why I asked the question, where do we go next?
On the agenda.
Look, Russ is happy, that's amazing.
Well, it was the last time I talked to him, I don't know about today, he didn't know, so.
You're making a motion?
No.
Thank you.
I don't see it, it's not an action
Oh,
item.
okay.
No,
All right, so can we put that then on the agenda for action at our next meeting?
Would that give everybody time to really look through these items, like
Yeah.
Table 2, for example, and really get into the meat of this as to what it means for our strategic planning sessions, priority and budgeting?
Yes.
That's what I'd like to do.
It's definitely gonna affect it.
Up next, planning commission review of parking. Collins? Lucky you.
Alright, so this is just an update for you guys, informational. So the parking ad hoc committee met on December 10th, 2018, and discussed phase 1 recommendations to bring to you guys, to bring the planning commission and then to you. So planning commission, it was brought to planning commission, these 4 items that I'll read off were brought to planning commission on January 7th. They motioned to recommend approval and bring it to you guys. We understand that it's probably going to be a large discussion, so this is so we're recommending a special meeting on January 31st to discuss the 4 proposed recommendations. So recommendation number 1 is to replace reverse angle parking with front end parking where reverse angle parking is currently located, and change the angle from a 45-degree angle to a 60-degree angle. And as you can see in my staff report, a lot of discussion was, there was a lot of confusion on whether or not, what is a 60-degree angle, what is a 45-degree angle, where's the angle measured, etc. And the staff report that was presented to the planning commission discusses that the current parking there is 60 degree, and what I believe planning commission desires and what the committee desires is 45 degree. So that would allow for, as you can see in the attachment provided, that would allow for a sharper angle so that when you're backing out, you can see people coming on driving will see the taillights easier, essentially. So if you have any questions with that, I can provide more diagrams, etc. Number 2, add parallel parking stripes on the north side of Mason Avenue between Fig Street and Peach Street. Recommendation 3, add parallel parking stripes on the north side of Mason Avenue from Harbor Street to Bay Avenue. And then number 4, add 1 handicap parking space each in the 0 block and the 100 block of Mason Avenue. So, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I guess the question for us is, I know a lot of public input has been gathered. Do we need a public hearing on behalf of the town council for this subject, given how prevalent across the community this subject is?
I think we have to if you change it.
All right, so that would occur after this January 31st meeting when we discuss it.
Yeah, it's all agreed upon to do it, or go forward with it, right?
Okay. Okay, that's what I want to make sure that we have it open to the public.
Just to answer on that,
Go ahead.
to elaborate on that, is the two items that have not had public input are the recommendation for the 45-degree angle that came from the chief of police, just a recommendation, and then the ADA compliance, which came from VDOT, to how many parking spaces should be required for ADA.
Well, I'm looking more what a formal public meeting on behalf of the town council would constitute, as opposed to collecting public comments through our ad hoc committee.
I think before we change that, I think it should be.
Right, okay, all right.
Well, I would be tempted to have a public hearing before we have a discussion about it,
Yeah.
and a special meeting about it. Really, I mean, then we could factor that in, whatever folks really do feel about it. I mean, we know a lot, that's for certain, and grateful that there have been so many opportunities for people to comment about it. But I don't really see a need for a special meeting to talk about something, and then we'll have public meeting hearing, and we'll get more stuff, we'll talk about it, and then we'll talk about it again. So why don't we just have a hearing and then do it?
And then I think, from what I read from, usually, we're gonna be the ones actually restriping the town, right? So that means we're gonna have to have budget money, restripe the town. So that's, I think, we got a little bit of time, let's do it right.
All right, so when would you target a formal public hearing?
Is there any urgency? Why couldn't we do it at the next council meeting?
Well, there is urgency on the part of ad hoc wanting to keep this thing moving.
Well, it's true, but again, we got, I mean, it's not like we got money in the budget now to go straight fines, so it's gonna be a while. We gotta approve the fund to do it, right?
The problem is it probably won't happen until next fall.
Right, so,
We're gonna have our budget meeting on the 7th, so we're not gonna know really, you have a better handle on where we are in the overall budget till after that. And I'm all for keeping it moving, but I don't, you know.
There's no doubt we know where the public stands on this, so.
Well, go forward, if we can get some, can we get some numbers to find out what it's actually gonna cost? Because we have to pull striking up and put striking down, so there's a cost.
Excuse me, we do have historical numbers on what it costs to restrike the last time we did it, so.
To actually take the striking up, I thought we paid,
It was striped after it was repaved. So it'll be more, you're gonna have to engage the surveyor to lay out a plan, and it'll probably be 2 or 3 times what we paid last time, but we have it down.
because that's a lot of striking went down all the way to Fig. It's a lot of striking went down to Fig.
Parallel strike.
Well, it's a parallel, but it's still a cost that wasn't there before.
Yeah, but we got it down.
I would recommend that we have an opportunity for a public comment on this specific thing at our February meeting. It's a meeting time that everybody already knows in the town we're here. It's not an extra kind of meeting.
Please encourage your people to come.
I agree with that.
Please.
I mean, we could put up.
Let's not talk about everybody now.
Item C, utility fee adjustments.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this is a follow-up to the comment that was received by town council at the last meeting relative to a high water bill, or high utility bill that was received by a customer who experienced a leak property. As is the requirements according to the town code, section 72-5, the utility bill was adjusted on the sewer side. We did still leave a large water bill. The customer came to council requesting some measure of relief for that large bill. The billing information is attached, so you can see where how the billing, what he experienced. The current balance is $843.46. He's been current on his bill since then, and he's requesting some relief. Staff's recommendation is that that we should continue to implement the ordinance language as is written. Staff does recommend the removal of penalties through January 2019, and if council finds consensus for a defined payment plan for a period of time to pay off the balance, provide direction to staff. That's council's consensus.
If you can just refresh, I tried to go back to the previous meeting. Was this a long-term lease or short term?
Apparently it happened over the span of a weekend.
Okay,
Or
that's
4
what-
days.
that's what I remember.
4 days?
So only this individual portion was subject to this section, and the water portion was.
Correct.
And so the adjustment was made for the sewer portion. I certainly think at the very least that the penalty might be able to adjust. But I would leave that to the treasurer to work out a payment plan that's appropriate for someone they can make a mistake payment plan.
Do we need a motion on this, or? Do we need a motion?
What are you looking for, Mary? Because there's no legislative action needed for an adjustment in accordance with what the ordinance already says.
Correct. The petitioner was for extended relief.
You want to say something?
Could I please say something? The reason I'm asking for this adjustment is when the leak, and it was over a weekend, and it was supposed to get fixed Monday, but the plumber didn't come until Tuesday. But I was told all along that the bill would be adjusted, I was not told that the sewer portion was the only thing that was to be adjusted. So I would basically, if I had known the water would not be adjusted, I would have taken different action. But I needed water over the weekend.
And the total bill now is what? Now?
Well, it's an additional 843.
And he's accruing penalties.
Here's the dilemma. We don't have anything in our ordinance that allows us to take that action as to water. We would be, I'm very sympathetic to what you're saying, please hear me. But if we do that, we are we're making a legislative action as to a single individual. I'm not opposed to relief for water either, personally, but that's not what our ordinance says.
But what do we do with the house over there by the park? Basement flooded last winter.
Well, this
The one that
basement was flooded.
I know, the one that filled up the basement, that's what I'm getting at. But did we adjust that one?
I'm sure the sewer was adjusted. I don't know what happened on the water side.
I mean, I kind of agree with Steve, that our ordinance states one thing, and that's kind of what, I mean, we're here to do is that if we want to change the ordinance, we need to change the ordinance, then we can adjust it.
Communication is definitely going to change.
So, get a motion on the floor.
Yeah, I move that we accept the staff recommendations as written and allow the treasurer to work out a defined payment plan.
Second.
Is there any appetite for a change of the ordinance to include water?
Well, let's go the extreme here. That's why I asked the question on a weekend. If this had gone on for a month, somebody had gone away, and I think that may have been the basement situation there too. There was miscommunications, what have you, but that went on for a long time.
At least a week.
Yeah, so it could be, 10 times this amount when you talk water.
Well, I have a problem with what Sheila's saying, because how often does this actually happen? This happens, how often? Do you know how often this happens?
Once a month.
Did someone bust a pipe or something?
Yeah, I mean, if you take all the stuff that happens during like coming up now, February, March, we're gonna have at least 6 or 8 of them. So, and then we have about 3 or 4 for the rest of the year. So you take all that, it's about once a month.
Bob, do you recall the rationale that changed that part of the ordinance when water relief things used to be done?
I think it was simply because the town is incurring a cost to process that water.
Certainly.
It's not free.
Absolutely, I understand.
Yeah.
But it's just as simple as that.
It's just as simple as that, and to Andy's point about the leak that went on for a week, I mean, we've had cases, I think, Dave, would have gone on for more than a week.
If we had done it, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a lot of water
Sure
through,
is.
through the plant that has to be treated.
Yeah, Hank's house had it up on Bay Avenue, Brenda's old house. I think it was going for probably 2 weeks until it started running in the street.
But alternatively, we don't, in a case like that, we don't process through the wastewater plant. So.
I don't know what the amount of this water was, but if that bill was $800, he probably used the equivalent of a whole day of the town production. So we pumped a whole day for that leak.
Sounds like guys are,
I need a motion. I think that's that.
Yeah, there's a second. Thank you for the discussion.
All in favor?
Right.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, town manager comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I just have one comment. That you received this as part of the weekly report that went out on Monday. This is a staff report on a conversation between myself and Aubrey Von Lindern, who is the Virginia Department of Historic Resources Certified Local Government Program Coordinator. Copy's been given to the clerk. If your pleasure, I'd like to read it into the record, and I'll be short. The following bullets provide the substance of a phone conversation between the town manager and a key staff member of the Virginia Department of Historic Resources held on Tuesday, January 8, 2019. While all the bullet points are worthy of note, a particular note was Ms. Von Lindern's affirmation once again that the Cape Charles Historic District is not under review or in danger or being delisted from historic designation. This is a common rumor in Cape Charles. Bullet number 1, preservation plan. The existing preservation plan dated March 1996 was written within the context of providing an overall development plan for the town. That plan is rooted in the then existing town conditions and preservation practices. Just 3 years later, on December 14, 1999, the town council adopted a comprehensive plan that states as follows on page 57. Quote, the preservation plan for the town of Cape Charles is a parallel document to the town's comprehensive plan, and as such should be reviewed at least every 5 years, close quotes. Over the years, that integration of preservation plan with comprehensive plan broke down. A new plan reflective of current town conditions and informed by contemporary preservation practices is needed and should be developed contemporaneous with the comprehensive plan revision scheduled for spring 2019 through summer 2021. Ms. Von Lindern encouraged this plan and stated that a copy of the late draft document should be submitted to the Virginia Department of Historic Resources for review prior to the town adopting the plan. Second, demolition. Ms. Von Lindern was informed about the demolition of the dilapidated commercial building at 207 Mason Avenue and the associated distress held by some in the community about that action. An action done in the interest of public safety after the town exhausted all due process requirements. Staff shared that research into the public record of demolition in the historic district reveals that 38 demolitions occurred between February 2002 and December 2018. All but one, 207 Mason Avenue, were residential structures, including historic duplex buildings. Several other buildings were demolished in the Harbor zoning district during this time period. 5 were demolished between January 1st, 2015 and December 31st, 2018. The single highest number for demolitions in any one calendar year occurred in 2006 and 2008, when 5 homes each were cleared from the district in each year. A complete listing of addresses and demolition dates can be seen in the building department office. There are contemporary photos of several of these demolished structures. Both staff and the Virginia Department of Historic Resources agree that demolition is the last option and the least desirable outcome. The loss of an excessive number of contributing structures can result in the delisting of a historic district. She affirmed that the Cape Charles District is not near that number and in no danger of being delisted. Meeting structure. Staff informed Ms. Von Lindern that the recent discussion with Town Council to introduce a two-step application procedure so the most appropriate treatment option and application materials can be discussed and agreed upon before an application can come to the Historic District Review Board for action on an application. Annual training course. In the past years, staff and Historic District Review Board members attended the one-day training course. Suffolk or Smithfield are the locations being considered for our area, but the exact location and date are not to be determined, are yet to be determined. VCRIS, the VCRIS found at the website www.dhr.virginia.gov/VCRIS holds information on historic districts in the Commonwealth and includes information on contributing structures, including photographs. This report is informational purposes and requires no legislative action at this time. I just thought it was necessary to and valuable to read that into the record relative to concerns about the status of the historic district. That concludes my comments.
Thank you very much. Mayor and council comments, Councilman Birch?
Two things. One is, I am very impressed with that, the beach plan and all the work that's been into that. I just want to say that again, that I did come to the earlier meeting in 2018, but not in the previous ones, I think in 2016, but a lot of good work, solid work's been done about that, and I appreciate everybody's efforts on it. And the second thing that I wanted to speak to was Mr. Russell's comments this evening, just as a sort of a question and a thought. Some of those things that are maintenance, I would think are already being communicated back and forth that you don't have to answer. I'm just thinking that they are. So I wasn't exactly sure that we needed another mechanism, but maybe we do. But I would assume that comes through a work order, Larry. So I really would encourage and ask Larry to look into that. I don't know that we have to have over-formalized processes for things, but obviously it seems like, we think we're doing things maybe and they don't think we're doing enough. So what the Citizens for Central Park has done for our town in developing that park, almost, it goes without saying, it's fabulous, it's wonderful. And the town owns that, and they put a lot of money into it, raised a lot of money, and we need to take care of it. So whatever we can do, Larry, that smooths out the communication there, I think that was a cry for better communication, if nothing else. What was the other last thing I wanted to say? Parking. So I'm assuming we are not having a work session on the 31st, but that we will have a public hearing first. Is that what I understand?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
I had three things. One, with regards to the water leak, I'd just like some assurances that we're consistent in our approach with what we deemed our actions today. So if you can look just back over, if they were saying we've had that many, I just appreciate some assurances that, yep, that's right in line with what we've been doing, and if not, then we bring the subject back to the table. Went to the Historic District Review Board last Tuesday, and one thing I would ask that we do in our meeting minutes is if we disapprove something, we document the reason for doing that. Right now, from what I've seen in meeting minutes, it shows votes 4-1. I'm not saying we have to document why the one voted one way. But if something went down, there should be an actual reason published in the meeting minutes there so that we can always point back to that. And the same goes for us if we do the same kind of thing.
Well, like findings, that's an overlay or zoning, so there should be some findings about how we get to whatever conclusion.
Correct. And it should be documented as such, because there's a lot of discussion that goes on as a result of that. The last thing I had was we had a session here on Saturday, a couple Saturdays ago, with regards to equal rights amendments, and just want to state that the question was it going to come out of committee, and it has, and the Senate voted to approve it, and now it goes into the House, so we're almost there for those that are supporting it. Yeah, that's all I have.
my thing on the Central Park is that they do a good job. The people that are working on the park now, the contractor. But like 2 or 3 years ago, Jeff Klingel walked through the park and the trees all were getting a blight or something, which would kill them. I guess they went to Brent and they went in and sprayed the trees. But that's what a lot of it is that who knows that much about the park, what's growing there, and how to take care of it, and when it gets an illness, that it doesn't die. So I think that's one of the things that he was talking about. At least that's something that I felt. Just to have a professional walk through and say, are all the trees healthy? Are the oyster shells the right thing to go? That was a big thing that came up.
Don't we have someone maintaining it that does that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think they just come in and what?
Yeah, but
They come in and cut the grass and weed the flower beds and.
They don't do inspections or anything? Do they do any inspections or anything?
They look, well, you know, we have an arborist come in from time to time, Knuckles Tree Surgeons from Virginia Beach, and they look at the trees and whatever, but, you know, stuff pops up in between visits, and, I mean, you know, there's bugs out there and stuff to eat these things up quick, like that bagworm thing on yeah, Melvin's tree. I mean, that's just, I'm not saying it happened overnight, but by the time anybody caught it, it was just too late.
The other thing I got is just to basically, not piggyback, but I think we need to work on some sort of communication with the water problem. Basically have some sort of sheet, if we have a leak, spell it out, hand it to them so they know exactly what's going to be expected of them, so they can make a good judgment on what to do. And not only that, is if we have something, do we have anything in place for when the community comes in and basically says, points out stuff that's going on in the park? You guys do a great job, but it's just sometimes something might get missed, because I don't know how often you get a chance to run through the park. Is if they ask for something, does somebody go look at it, and then do we put a work order in? I mean, is there any kind of steps that when the public come in, do we just brush them off, or do we actually, because I think in the past, I think they get brushed off a lot.
I don't think so. I mean, they come in, they tell us something, we get a work order and get it done. I don't think you're gonna find too many people in this town that are gonna say that we brush something off.
Well,
I mean, really.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
And even this, I've got this man's list, I'm gonna make a little work order for every one of those items and send it to John, and they'll be taken care of.
all right, how long you have that list?
The tennis court, one day.
All right.
The tennis court, we got a price on that, we got that back in October to resurface and all. That's gonna be done in the spring, and the lights for the tennis court, I've had a price for that for a while. Just for those items that are kind of elective, I like to wait until springtime so I can see where we're at with the money. And it looks like we're gonna be good. I think the tennis court is gonna be beautiful with the pickleball court too. All you pickleballers, you know, this is your year. This is the year of pickleball.
So, you're gonna make it a multi-use facility now?
Sorry?
We're just gonna make it a multi-use facility for pick and choose what we put in there?
Yeah. We know in the basketball court too.
You good for basketball court there?
We're good.
I mean, if you're gonna make it multi-use, you just can't pick and choose what you're doing. I don't think that's fair. I'm putting that out there, that's my opinion. If you're gonna do one, you gotta do them all. Just saying.
Wait a minute, how do you put a basketball court in a tennis court? I mean, really?
It's a movable, they're movable baskets.
You can talk to us tonight. He brought us pictures.
Does anybody address them?
Well, where do you move it? So
You
somebody
can
put
move it off to the corner.
They're all over the place, Dave.
If you're gonna bring up and you're gonna make multi-use out of this, you open that can of worms, you gotta do it for everybody. You can't just pick and choose what you do. That's not fair.
I
Sorry.
think you can limit what happens on the tennis court to tennis.
You're changing it from tennis to something else. That's my opinion. I'll leave it at that. I think my time's up.
Yes.
I second.
I only have a couple things. One, I don't think wouldn't say that. Two, I want to thank Public Works, Recreation Department, Police Department, for the outstanding job they did for the Drop River Grand Pond. It was a good turnout. It was a great turnout. Thank you all very much. I am appreciative of the work that the Dunes and Wetlands Board, they put a lot of time and a lot of energy into that. It was presented to us tonight. And I do think that we need to adopt that in the near future. Other than that, I really don't have a whole lot else. Except for a few announcements. The town offices is closed for the rest of the month. The 18th and 21st. Of course, my office hours is every Wednesday, except for February the 6th. Our auditors will be taking up my office, so I don't have an office to go to, so I'll take that day off. January the 26th, Town Council Strategic Planning Session. I skipped one. January 24th, VML Legislative Day. January 31st, Town Council Special Meeting. That could change to something else. We may stay the same. February 7th, Town Council Work Session, an executive session. February 18th, Town Offices is closed. February 21st is the Town Council regular meeting. Can I get a motion to